The CTF isn't the only major organization speaking out against this. Today, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh just spoke about these taxes. He's against them as well. So what do we know so far about the Quebec government's proposed tax on the unvaccinated?
We don't have a lot of details. It seems like taxpayers may be paying it through their provincial tax filing. We don't know how much it would cost. It still seems a little half-baked. But here's what we do know. It would be a slippery slope. It would open up the floodgates to a raft of new types of taxes. And also, we're not going to tax our way out of a pandemic. And that's why you have some politicians and bureaucrats, they're trying to target Canadians. They're trying to divide Canadians, I should say. But that's why we're saying all Canadians, whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, you have to unite against this new tax.
Now, on the other hand, Premier Legault claims that this is a health contribution from the unvaccinated. So considering that the unvaccinated are more likely to need medical care, do you think this is a fair ask?
Well, this is not a health contribution. This is a new tax. I think we have to make that clear. And what the pandemic has really done, it put a spotlight on some of the issues in our government healthcare system that were going on even before COVID-19. So Canadians before the pandemic were paying more than many of our industrialized peers for healthcare, but we weren't getting the best results. We weren't getting the best results on things like acute care beds per capita or doctors per capita. There were capacity issues before the pandemic. Now, fast forward to today. The federal government has spent more than $500 billion on the pandemic. You have provincial healthcare budgets in total, nearly $400 billion since 2020. So I think that leaves us with two crucial questions. First is, well, how many hundreds of billions of dollars do taxpayers need to fork over before our healthcare system is not on the brink of collapse? And second, well, when are these politicians and bureaucrats who haven't missed a paycheck, who are getting six-figure taxpayer funded salaries, when are they going to be held accountable for their failure to come up with better solutions?
And it's interesting that the CTF is calling on all Canadians, vaccinated and unvaccinated, to unite and speak out against this tax. Why should all Canadians care about this?
Particularly if you're vaccinated, you should stand up against this. Some politicians, they want the unvaccinated to pay more today, but who are they going to come after tomorrow? We have to remember that there's a lot of actions that we take in our day-to-day lives that could put us in the hospital. And here's some examples. If you put a little bit too much butter on your popcorn, are you going to have to send the government a check? If you're like me and you ate way too much over the holidays, put on a bit too much weight, are you going to get a tax bill for that? But what about your kids or your grandkids? If they fall off their bike trying a new jump, is a tax bill going to come with stitches? So really, we see this as a very slippery slope, and that's why all Canadian taxpayers need to unite against this new tax.
So considering that this is a pandemic-related tax, sir, how much extra or new taxes have Canadians already paid during the pandemic itself?
Well, Canadians are already overtaxed. Just think about all the taxes that we have to pay. You got income taxes, business taxes, sales taxes, property taxes, import taxes, carbon taxes, you name it, taxpayers pay it. And even in the pandemic, the average family's budget, 36% of it goes to taxes. And that's more than what the average Canadian family pays on the necessities like food, shelter, and clothing combined.
All right, sir, just about a minute left here. So how can Canadians hold their politicians and bureaucrats accountable as the CTF is calling for them to do?
Well, I think you have to call your politicians, specifically your premier, and tell them that you will not tolerate any new type of tax. And what's so concerning is that this is following a trend from some of our governments here, where their only solution, so-called, it seems like, is to hammer Canadians with a higher tax bill, right? Some politicians want Canadians to drive fewer trucks, so they hammer us with a carbon tax. When carbon taxes don't work, they hammer us with higher carbon tax. To address housing prices, you have these bureaucrats funding reports to hit us with a new home tax. So this is following a very clear but disturbing trend.
Some food for thought there, sir. Thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Well, thanks for having me on.
We'll be right back after the break with a look at news from around the world as the European Parliament elects a new president and Russia redeploys troops from its far east to the west. We'll be back.